Jimmy Phelan came to be the head coach of the Huskies. Coach Phelan had many successful years.
Corner of the end zone where Mark Patterson makes the catch with just 34 seconds to go.
Pull, great time! Yes! Walk into the end zone! Touchdown, Washington!
They say a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. That's why a college football team is always a work in progress. The coach's goal? Build strength in every position. Sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But just when you think you have it all figured out, seniors graduate, freshmen rotate in, and the whole dance starts all over again. Every once in a while, a perfect storm comes along, and in 1991, Don James put together a team even the best forecasters couldn't predict. When the Huskies unleashed their purple rain in 1991, it poured. 1991 was a year when one of the busiest people on the field was the scoreboard keeper. Some Saturdays it looked like a bull market on Wall Street with numbers ticking up by the minute. By the end of the first half, most games were over. 91 started out with a bang in January. The Huskies were taking care of a little unfinished business from the year before. It was called the Rose Bowl. The Huskies battled against Iowa, and Iowa was losing the battle against one man in particular, defensive lineman Steve Entman. Senior running back Greg Lewis had 1,000-yard seasons as a Husky. He held nothing back that day. Quarterback Mark Brunell was on fire, and he had no problem finding his favorite receiver, Mario Bailey. And on the next drive, Brunell had no problem finding the end zone himself. By the second half, Don James was rotating in the second-string players. Iowa tried to rally, but the Huskies had owned the contest from the very first play. When the dust settled, the Huskies took the trophy with a 46-34 win, and Mark Brunell was named Player of the Game. When the Dawgs opened their 91 season against Stanford, they hadn't lost a beat. In fact, they looked stronger than ever. And with Steve Entman, it was like having 12 or 13 players on the field.
In the seasons of 90 and 91, he was about as dominant as a defensive lineman can be, and that's really where it all starts. I mean, when you can just dominate up front and you make the other team have to spend so much attention on just one guy up front, that frees up everything for everybody else around them. And he was definitely the key to the whole thing. And sometimes you can be that kind of player and other teams really focus on you, and it can be that kind of thing where just it's everybody else that makes plays but not you because you're getting double and triple team. But in Entman's case, he was still able to find ways around that and make plays.
Steve is by far on any level the best player I've ever played with or against. His effort, his athleticism, his power, his passion, everything was a 10 out of 10.
It's a combination of size and speed and having such a great heart. And he was brought up on a farm, so he was used to getting up at 4 in the morning and going out and feeding and milking. And I love the fact that I asked him about his idol, and his idol was his dad and his grandpa. And it's that sort of a core that he had as far as building on just really great size and foot speed. And he had worked so hard. His upper body strength was so dominant.
Entman embodied the new Husky defense, size and speed.
The emphasis on speed came after the Freedom Bowl went over Florida when the Huskies beat Emmitt Smith in the Freedom Bowl, and Don James, for whatever reason, a light bulb went off, and he said to himself, I got to have speed. And people think about speed, they think about speed at running back and wide receiver, but you don't think about speed at defensive end. You don't think about speed at linebacker or safety, and they had guys that could run, man.
Don grasped the impact that speed could have on the game. And they kind of changed the kind of kids they were bringing in. And it was less on size and it was more on speed and quickness and athletic ability. And it also gave, those guys became weapons for Jim to use. And Jim was, he was a magician in terms of putting together defensive game plans. And he changed how people in the Pac-10 had to play, because he took the game out of the coordinator's hands. The offensive coordinator who was calling the play took it out of his hands, and they would line up in stuff that made the quarterback audibilize to something that Jim wanted him to run, that he knew he was going to be able to stop. And that was the secret to it. They were really performing at the top of their capabilities. They were outperforming people right and left. I mean, really good, solid teams. They were sometimes bigger, sometimes stronger, but Jim had put together some unbelievable defensive game plans that just crunched people.
When UW played Arizona in 1991, the Wildcats bent and buckled under the seasoned Husky defense led by Entman.
Everybody remembers the Arizona game that year when the first 2 plays of the game, he sacks the quarterback, and the crowd just going crazy. And so, a lot of times defensive linemen and dominant defensive linemen can almost be decoys, because everybody knows, okay, they're going to double or triple team him, so it's everybody else going to have to make plays. But Entman found a way to make a lot of great plays anyway.
That was a great day for the Husky defense. Cornerback Walter Bailey makes a huge pick for 6. And on offense, Mark Brunell and Mario Bailey keep rolling up the score. By the end of the day, the Dawgs racked up 54 unanswered points. The very next Saturday, it's deja vu all over again. Toledo comes to town to put points on the board, but Billy Joe Hobart and Mario Bailey beat them to the punch. The Husky defense and linebacker Jaime Fields make Toledo's life miserable. And Mark Brunell and Jay Barry get creative for a score. The Huskies roll it up again. 48-0 is the final score.
Mario Bailey's 11th score of the season eclipsed a 25-year-old school record held by Dave Williams for touchdown receptions in a single season.
By that year, by 91, we all knew the offense so well, and we were so integrated across every position group that the receivers knew what we were doing. We knew what the running backs were doing. We knew what the quarterbacks were doing. We knew why they were making adjustments. And it had a lot to do with, we weren't just taught how to do it, we were taught why we did it. We were really hard on each other. It didn't take a lot of discipline from the coaches to get us going the right direction, because we just did it ourselves.
The biggest challenge on the 91 Husky schedule was Nebraska, always looking for a fight. The Cornhuskers wasted no time scoring, and the Huskies found themselves in a hole early, down 21-9.
There was always 3 or 4 guys on the field who had a total grasp of what was going on. Even in tough times, like when we were at Nebraska and we're down 21-9, I think, going into halftime, there was no panic. We just had a good sense of what we were doing, and we knew we were better than them. There was always 3 or 4 guys on the field who kind of thought like coaches.
One of those leaders was Dave Hoffman, who turned the momentum around. The Huskies step up the attack with Billy Joe Hobart at the helm. Vino Bryant finds a chink in the Nebraska armor. Hobart finds Orlando McKay in the end zone. Hobart makes the game personal. Jay Barry has one of the best runs in his career. It was a shootout, 618 yards of total offense for the Dawgs, and a 36-21 win over the Cornhuskers.
That was the first team that I really remember kind of having that swagger. They were cocky on the field with the way they behaved, the way they swarmed the football. I don't ever remember a play where it was only one guy that made a tackle. It was a swarm of players. You get one guy to the ball, and that's like a magnet. Boom, there's 4 or 5 extra players right on it. Even after the whistle's blown, guys shaking each other, punching them in the face, grabbing their face masks, spitting out of their mouths. It was unbelievable.
We go out there and just establish that you're not going to run the ball on us. You're going to run the ball 3 times, you're going to lose 4 yards, and it's going to hurt. And then after that, we'd start getting in their heads and start to the fakes and the up calls, the changes, changing coverages, blitzing, fake the blitz. Quarterback doesn't know what to do, and the offensive coordinator up in the box doesn't know what to do.
Our defense got all the credit because they were so dominating, but our offense was definitely no slouch. We were one of the best offenses. We never had to really play as much. We always, I tell people all the time, my last 2 years, I only played in the fourth quarter a handful of times. Our coach was not one of those coaches to run up the score, so we'd be out by fourth quarter, sometimes by halftime. Offensively, our line was just tremendous, from Soup to Ed to everybody else, to our tight ends. We could put in Aaron Pierce and Mark Bruner. You know, we had a couple quarterbacks, we had a couple 1,000-yard backs. We had everything.
Billy Joe Hobart, Orlando McKay, Aaron Pierce, Mark Bruner, Mario Bailey, that offensive line with Lincoln and Sapele Malamala and Ed Cunningham and Chris Rongan and all those great names up front. You know, Billy Joe and Mark Brunell obviously split some time at QB when Mark went down with an injury in the spring, and Billy Joe took over and played that great Stanford game to start the year, and the job was his as a starter the rest of the year.
An unspoken rule in college football is not to run up the scoreboard over a losing team. But in 1991, this was a band of brothers who really knew how to have fun, and Don James enjoyed every second.
I can remember as a freshman and talking about, we're going to go 60-0 here. We're not going to lose. I mean, that team just expected to win. And it was obviously talented, arguably one of the greatest teams of all time in college football, and I think every undefeated team would say that.
The dominoes were falling hard in 91. Oregon State, a 29-7 win. Arizona State, 44-16. USC, 14-3. And the Huskies destroyed Oregon State in a 58-6 rally. By the time WSU arrived at Husky Stadium on November 23rd, the Huskies were on the crest of a perfect season, and all that home perfection was let loose on the Cougars. Billy Joe Hobart wasted no time in finding Orlando McKay for a 69-yard play. Running back Darius Turner blasts through the Cougars for 6. The defense lives up to its reputation. Walter Bailey makes his second pick for 6 this season. And Mark Brunell comes in to find Mario Bailey for 6 more. Deep in their own territory, the Cougars get trapped by Jaime Fields. Dino Bryant breaks into the end zone for a score. Hobart and Bailey pile on another 6. Mark Brunell finishes the game with a TD. 56-21. The Apple Cup stays in Seattle, and the Huskies and Don James are going back to Pasadena.
There are two reasons for doing this today. One is for the coaches and his team to thank you people for the great support. We appreciate it.
A standout season filled with standout players. There were a lot of favorites to pick from.
I mean, you think about that 91 football team, and that offense, man, I think it began and ended with Mario Bailey. I mean, you know, this is a guy that was so small, he couldn't even ride the roller coaster at the Fun Forest, all right? That's how short this guy was. And I can kid him because he's a friend of mine. Mario Bailey was unstoppable that year. I mean, maybe because he was so small, he would just get behind the secondary and nobody would see what the hell he was. But he was an unbelievable inspiration to everybody, because here's a guy that is not supposed to be doing this. He's not 6'2", 220 pounds. He doesn't have the blazing fast, 4.2 40 speed. He was pretty fast, but he's just this little guy from Franklin High School. He's a homegrown guy, locally grown guy that's making these incredible plays, diving for balls in the back of the end zone, going across the middle, doing all these unbelievable things that guys that are that small aren't supposed to do. So Mario Bailey on that team was an inspiration for everybody, man.
My all-time favorite player is Napoleon Hoffman. He was here a few years ahead of me, and so I watched him when I was in high school and watched him just rip up Pac-10 opponents. And I always loved him because he reminded you of Barry Sanders, where he'd hide and then he'd just explode, and how the frustration on the defense where they'd think they'd have him and then he'd just kind of tiptoe and he'd be gone. And I always just thought he was so much fun to watch. And he played with such a joy. You just loved, you put the ball in his hands and it's like you watch him, fourth graders out on the playground. He would just find a way. It may not be the play, but he would find a way to get past the defense and score. He was a great running back here, and he did things differently, I think, than any running back that I can ever remember here. Just the way that he could manipulate a defense and turn it upside down with his speed.
I'd never seen anyone so fast. I mean, he was so fast the first game he played in that he would fall down. Literally, he would fall because his feet were moving too fast. And then he spent a little time in the weight room, and it was something else to turn around, hand the ball off to number 8, and watch him do his thing. In my opinion, Napoleon Hoffman was the greatest Husky. If he was featured carrying the ball 35 times a game, he probably would have set every NCAA record. But he was a part of the team, and that was the way we did things and the way we won.
If I had to pick one guy, it would have to be Steve Entman as the best player I've ever seen, and not just the most dominating player, but the best football player. And I think oftentimes we reserve that for offensive players, and because they handle the ball and so forth. But Steve Entman as an athlete and a football player to me was absolutely unparalleled. And I thought to myself, good Lord, how can a guy that big be that light on his feet? That big and strong, be that agile, that light on his feet. And that, to me, just kind of sealed the deal, not to mention watching him just destroy team after team almost, I won't say single-handedly, but a guy that they had to game plan around, and you couldn't game plan for him once the whistle blew and you saw what Steve Entman was all about. Nobody could block him. He was the best football player I had seen then, and for my money still is the best football player I've ever seen go through here.
On January 1, 1992, the perfect storm called the Washington Huskies blew into Pasadena, California to face the Michigan Wolverines. 103,000 people quickly saw why the Huskies were Rose Bowl favorites. Walter Bailey snags an interception. And then Billy Joe Hobert connects with Mario Bailey. Hobert runs for a touchdown. And then Steve Entman explodes through the Michigan offensive line. It's a great day of dog highlights to keep the replay guys busy cueing tapes. The lasting image of the game, Mark Brunell comes in to complete a touchdown pass to Mario Bailey, who strikes a very familiar pose. The Huskies close out a perfect 1991 season, defeating Michigan 34-14, the first perfect season since 1915.
We're number one now.
At the end of the 1991 season, the accolades punctuate just how special the year is. Mario Bailey wins multiple awards, including Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year. Steve Entman wins the Lombardi Trophy and Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year. Lineman Lincoln Kennedy is awarded the Morris Trophy, and most deservedly, Don James wins not only the Pac-10 Coach of the Year, but National Coach of the Year. A perfect choice.
I think we were just over 500 yards a game, almost perfectly balanced, 250 and 250. The two tight ends went on to be starters in the NFL. 3 of the starting offensive linemen went on to be starters in the NFL. Mario Bailey went on to a great professional career. He, kind of in and out of the NFL, but he played in NFL Europe. He played forever in the Arena League. Bino Bryant played in the NFL. Jay Berry played in the NFL. Of course, Napoleon Kaufman was a freshman at the time and ended up playing a lot because we'd be so far ahead. When I got to the NFL, when I was with the Arizona Cardinals, they actually said we're trying to practice like they do at the University of Washington, because they had gone up to study how many repetitions we got in a practice. I mean, we'd get 100 to 150 reps in a practice. That's unheard of.
In the NFL Draft in 1992, 11 Husky players were picked up to go pro. Mark Brunell, Billy Joe Hobert, and Napoleon Kaufman were not far behind. There has never been a year like this in the history of Husky football, and that makes this season perhaps the greatest moment in all of Husky Stadium.
Next time on Greatest Moments at Husky Stadium.
There's a lot of pride involved. It's not about just wearing the helmet. It's knowing that you earn the right to wear that helmet, to play in this stadium, to play in front of these fans.